Hello everyone, I'm Andrew, and today I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read in May. In May, I participated in the Asian Readathon that was set up by Cindy, which I really enjoyed. I read a total of 10 books this month, which is a lot for me, and 7 of those had an Asian main character or were written by an Asian author. The first book that I read was the graphic memoir The Best We Could Do by T. Bui. This is a story about the author's parents and her as a young child escaping from Vietnam after the war, and their life growing up and what moving to America was like. I found this very, very interesting. However, I honestly don't think I can give this a star rating. I gave it 4 stars, but this is someone's life, and I'm not sure you can put a star rating on that. But I did enjoy it, and it was very beautifully and sorrowfully told. This is not the happiest story in the world, but I think it's very meaningful. And if you want to read a more personal account of refugees escaping from Vietnam, I would highly recommend it. Next I read You Asked for Perfect by Laura Silverman. This is the story of Ariel, who is a high school student. He is Jewish, and his home life is pretty great, but he is feeling a ton of pressure from school and from his parents to succeed, to perform, to get into a good college, and he is really pushing himself past the breaking point. When he gets a bad grade in a math test, things start spiraling downward, and he has to get help from another student. He gets help from Amir, who he has known for a while but never really been close to, and things start to develop between them at the same time as his grades and his achievements start to weigh down on him, on Ariel. This was a really good representation of school stress and anxiety. I felt this a little bit when I was in high school, but even more so, honestly, now that I'm in college. I think Laura Silverman did a really good job writing the relationships, not just the romantic relationships, but the friend and the family relationships. Ariel's best friend and him have a very interesting relationship that has its ups and downs, and I really appreciated that being represented in the story as well. Also, this was the classic story of the former gifted kid who did really well in elementary school and middle school, and then has all this pressure placed on them, or they feel like they have this pressure placed on them, to perform perfectly and get excellent grades from there on out, which I definitely experienced as a kid, and still do to some extent. Ariel in this story has a really, really hard time at saying no and refusing requests. This is something that I've gotten really good at recently, saying no, but I had to develop that over time. It's not something that I'm naturally inclined to, and I liked seeing that in the story and seeing how that affected his life. And overall, this story was really cute. There were stressful moments, but there were also really sweet moments, and I liked seeing all of those together in the story. It felt like a pretty true representation of high school life, especially for an overachiever. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read the group book for the Asian Readathon, which is 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, which is edited by Ellen O. and Elsie Chapman, and this book was very interesting. It is a series of short stories by Asian authors based on different Asian mythologies and legends, and I thought it was really neat, especially that there was an explanation after each story about what story it was adapted from. And overall, I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. There are some really good stories, some really bad stories. My favorites were Steel Skin by Lori M. Lee. I love me a good cyborg story. And The Crimson Cloak by Cindy Pon. I thought it was very heartwarming, I guess, and a good, actually better twist on a romantic tale. My least favorite was The Spear Carrier by Raul Kanakia. I honestly felt like this character in the story was at the very same place at the beginning as he was at the end, and I just really didn't get it. I know some people love that story, but it was not for me. Overall, I liked this collection, and it was really interesting to see these adaptations of Asian mythologies and learn more about them. After that, I read Volume 2 of Spirit Fingers. This is a Korean graphic novel series. It is originally a webtoon online, and it is all in Korean. This is not in English, and I was using it to hone my Korean skills, but I also really, really enjoy this series. In this volume, the main character, Uyeon, really builds up her confidence in herself and in her life, and I really love stories where characters gain more confidence and grow like that, so that was really exciting for me to see. One of the main male characters, Nam Ki-jung, is really mean in this volume, and honestly, I'm afraid that he's going to end up being the main love interest, and if he is, he needs to do a lot of growing and a lot more character development, in my opinion. Overall, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read the first volume of the very first ever manga that I read, which is Our Dreams at Dusk, Shimanami Tasogari, which is written by Yuki Kamatani. This is a queer story. It follows the main character, Tasuku Kaname, and he is outed as gay at his high school, and he is considering doing the unthinkable when he meets a very strange person named Someone-san. And this person introduces him to this house that is a meeting place for lots of people who all turn out to be queer, and he really gets to know them and gets involved. This is a good story. I really liked it. I really liked the queerness. However, it is very short, and I honestly felt like I had only read the first chapter in a story. It did not really grab me yet. I want to read the next book because I want to know what happens, but I feel like the first book should have been a little bit longer. I didn't get enough content for one book, in my opinion. But I did really like what I have read so far from here, and I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read a book that I had heard some very interesting things about, which is In the Vanishers Palace by Aliette de Bodard. This book is actually a Vietnamese-inspired retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but very, very loosely. Because of a deal that the elders in her village make, the main character, Yen, she is given to a dragon, Vukan, who has done a favor for the village. When Yen is taken to Vukan's palace, she thinks that Vukan is going to eat her, but actually Vukan, the dragon, she just wants Yen to teach her children. Vukan, this dragon spirit, lives in a palace of beings called the Vanishers. The Vanishers were aliens from another planet or dimension, it's not really made clear, who came to this world and completely ravished it, devastated it, left it completely broken. And now after they have left, Vukan the dragon has taken up residence in a palace that they built. Yen begins to live there with her and to train her students, and feelings begin to develop between Yen and Vukan. This story was very, very weird, and I liked it. It reminded me, honestly, a lot of J.Y. Young's stories. They wrote the Tensorit series, and it was honestly very, very trippy the entire time. I really liked that aspect of it. I liked the two children, Vukan's two children. I thought the relationship between Yen and Vukan was a little bit insta-lovey, but overall, I thought this was really interesting. It didn't totally grab my attention, but I would highly recommend it to anyone who is looking for a weird, queer Asian story. And I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is one that everyone has been talking about, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. You've probably heard about this book if you are active on BookTube or BookTwitter. It is about the son of the President of the United States and the Crown Prince of Wales going from enemies to lovers. It is new adult, and it is a wild ride, let me tell you. I don't want to give away too much about the story because the characters and the plot are just so interesting, and I really fell in love with them. The story is very sexy. I honestly don't read a lot of smut, and I wouldn't say that this is smut, but it is some of the sexier fiction that I have ever read. Like, the whole middle third was sex scenes, and whew, oh boy. But it was also very modern. I'm not sure it's actually going to age well because of the meme language and the texting that goes on in this book, but it's very relevant to modern day, and I really appreciated that. They felt like very true young millennials in this book. Also, the main character, Alex, is from Texas, and there was a little bit of discussion in this book about how people have certain expectations of red states like Texas that aren't necessarily true of all Texans, and that red states should not be written off as just completely homophobic or conservative or anything like that. There's a lot of positivity there as well. You just have to look for it. I overall really, really enjoyed this book, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I am really looking forward to Casey McQuiston's next book, which is a female-female romance, and I can't wait for more queer rom-coms. Oh boy. Next, I read Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. This is a graphic novel. The main character, Freddie Riley, is gay, and her girlfriend, Laura Dean, keeps breaking up with her, as the title suggests. She writes into an advice column, and asks, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? Why does love hurt so much? A lot of the typical teenage angst stuff that a lot of us as teenagers go through. This really explores Freddie and her friends and a little bit of Laura Dean. And let me just say one thing. When I was writing my notes about what I thought about the story, I wrote, I hate Laura Dean 3 times in a row, and I stick by that statement. I hate Laura Dean so much, you guys. I also wrote angry in caps several times because that's how Laura Dean made me feel. However, I thought the ending of this book was really good, and I thought it wrapped things up nicely, but I am still very, very angry at Laura Dean. Also, this book deals with some other topics. It deals with teenage pregnancy and abortion, which you don't see in YA very much at all, and I thought was handled very well. And it also deals with how friend relationships are affected by romantic relationships, which is something that we all know happens, and I thought it was a really good look at that. And honestly, I don't know what to rate this book. It made me so angry, but also I think it's important. So I wound up going with 4 stars, but that might change. I do think that it's a very interesting book if you want some teenage angst, and if you want a very satisfying ending to some characters that make you very angry, I recommend this book. Next, I read Volume 3 of Spirit Fingers, and I like this one a lot more than Volume 2. In this book, Uyan and Kijong, the male and female lead of this story, had a lot of character development, although they both need a lot more, in my opinion. And Nam Kurin, the character depicted here, who is the older sister of Kijong, also got a lot of backstory in this book, and I think she needs a lot more. I'm really, really interested in her character now, and I want to see more of that in Volume 4. I do have the next 3 volumes of this book sitting on my shelf waiting for me to read them, so I will probably get to those in the next month or 2, and I am really looking forward to it. I gave this volume 4.5 out of 5 stars. Lastly, in May, I read another book that the book community is going crazy over, and that is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This is the story of Ben. Ben comes out to their family as non-binary and is summarily kicked out in the very first chapter. They have to go live with their sister Hannah, start a new school in the middle of senior year, and things get complicated. This is a very heartfelt story, and honestly, I am personally very cisgender, but I have lots of trans friends and several non-binary friends, and this reminded me of them. Some of the things that they've said about their experience with gender were brought up in this book, and it reminded me of them a lot. Also, this book has some very complex sibling relationships between Ben and Hannah that I really appreciated. Ben also started going to therapy. I thought that was really cool. The way this book handles these relationships and Ben's understanding of their self, how it grows, I thought was really cool. Also, Nathan, the main love interest, is too pure for this world, and he needs to be protected at all costs. While I thought the ending of this book was wrapped up a little too nicely with a nice bow on top, the story as a whole was very, very touching, and I have several places marked in this book that made me cry or made me really feel deep emotions, and I am really excited for anything else that Mason Deaver writes because this book was phenomenal, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Well, that is everything that I read in May. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!